Hey friends, what's up? And welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Daf 4 of Masechta Taanis. Friends, what does Daf Dal talk about? Some interesting Agadita kind of stuff at the beginning. Very fun little thingies. And then, back to Masha V'ruach, Moed Geshem, V'sein Talamat Levracha. When exactly you start saying V'sein Talamat Levracha. So, Lemaisa, I got caught up on this shtickle. I'll tell you a maisa. I was at WeWork recently. I've been going to WeWork, anyways. So I was there, and they needed somebody to be a shliach tzibur for mincha. So I said, "What the heck?" So I did it, and it was like right after Sukkot. I made a mistake, and I said v'sein talamatu levracha when I should have said v'sein bracha, because we only start saying v'sein talamatu levracha on the 7th of Cheshvan, but we will see it's Taka Machlokas. We're going to get to that a little bit later. Friends, let's jump in. We are on Daf Daled, the second line of the Daf. V'omer Ravi, and said Ravi, Haitzub Merabonon, this young whippersnapper, a young Talmud Chacham, Domil Partzida de Tuse Kala. A young Talmud Chacham is similar to a seed that is beneath a clod of dirt. That once it begins to sprout, it doesn't stop. So also says Rashi, a young Torah scholar, once already his name starts to kind of spread, right? What is it? Once already he starts to make a name for himself, it just grows and grows. It becomes viral. V'amaravin, says Rava, Haitzub Merabonon, this young Torah scholar, Dirasach, who gets upset, who gets angry. Or Raisa, Hudika Miraschale, it is the Torah that is really being angering him. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Halukot Dvar Ki'esh Nu'um Hashem, that my words are like fire, says the Eibishter. So, meaning the fellow, Rashi says the fellow, because he studies so much Torah, becomes very, very sensitive, and therefore when he gets upset, it's not just because in his nature is an upset fellow, but it's because he's become very, very particularly sensitive on account of all the Torah that he's been studying. He's become a sensitive fellow. V'amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Kol Talmud Chacham, okay, every single Torah scholar, Sheinu kosher ki barzel, any Torah scholar who is not hard as iron, Eino Talmud Chacham, it's not a real Torah scholar. Interesting. You have to be strong like iron. Okay. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, and like a hammer shatters a stone. Alright? I guess an iron hammer. Says Rab Abba to Rav Ashi, you learn it from there. We learn it from here. The land that its stones are iron, don't read it, it's stones, but rather it's builders, right? The fellows, the people that study Torah and keep the world built and alive, so keep the world going. So they are kibarzel, they are like iron. It says Ravina, nonetheless, a fellow needs to chill out. Lemaisa, right? A fellow needs to learn how to chill out. Shenema, as the pasuk says, and you shouldn't be angry. So even though if you have a young Torah scholar, and if he gets upset, it's not really because he's a nudnik, it's because he's become overly sensitive, but still, says Ravina, you still gotta chill out. You can chill out. Why not chill out? What do you have to do to chill out? You just gotta chill out. So do that. Alright. Omer B'Shmuel Banachmani Omer B'Yonason. Says B'Shmuel Banachmani the name of B'Yonason. Shlosha Shalu Shaloka Hogan. There were 3 fellows who asked for something from God, and they asked for it not exactly in the right way. Now, nonetheless, in 2 out of 3 of those cases, the Eibishter replied, in an okay way. He said, okay, you didn't really ask for it properly, but nonetheless, I'll take care of you. in one of the instances, the Eibishter did not take care of the fellow. These are them: Eliezer Eved Avram, V'Shaul ben Kish v'Yiftach Hagiladi. Okay, these are the three examples. Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, Shaul, the son of Kish, and Yiftach Hagiladi. Okay, Eliezer Eved Avram. How do we know that Eliezer, the servant of Avram Avinu, asked not exactly in the right way? The pasuk says, "V'haya naire asher omar eleh." It will be the young woman that I will say to her, "Hatino kadech v'gomer." Can you help me out with some water? So basically, Eliezer said, "Look, what's the sign? The sign is I'll go up to a random girl, I'll ask for help, and if she says yes, then that's it." Now, afilu chigeres, afilu suma, that it's very general, it's very broad. But any girl who's going to help me out, this is going to be a wife for Yitzchak. What if this girl had some kind of mum or some, what if it wasn't the best girl, whatever it is? So he's kind of leaving himself open by just leaving that one sort of thing that any girl who comes by and helps me out is right. I mean, it could end up being the wrong girl. So Yeshivo Kahogan v'nizdamna lo Rivka. Nonetheless, God was like, all good, bro, and He sent along Rivka, and of course, as we know, the rest is history. Yitzchak and Rivka gave birth to Yaakov and Esav, of course, and Kilu, all the generations that ultimately evolved from that union. Shaul ben Kish, Shaul, the son of Kish, the pasuk says, "V'haya ish asher yakenu," and it will be the fellow who smites Goliath. Yashanu melech osher gadol, so the king will give him a lot of wealth. As bito yitin lo, and he will give his daughter to this fellow. So Shaul, he basically promised his daughter to whoever smites Goliath. Yachal afilu eved, afilu mamzer. What if the fellow to smite Goliath was a servant, a slave? What if he was a fellow from a union who would not be able, right? What if it was a fellow from a not allowed relationship, who was a mamzer and would be unable to marry to marry his daughter Michal? So what about that? He didn't take that into account when he just said whoever smites Goliath, I'll have him marry my daughter. So Shiva Kahogan, but nonetheless, the Eibishter took care of Shaul ben Izdam lo David, and David HaMelech, of course, was the one to slay Goliath. So it worked out. Yiftach Hagiladi and Yiftach Oichit. Also, Yiftach asked for something, not, I guess, specific enough, or not really thinking the whole big picture. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, that he says, look, when I come back from battle, the first thing to come out of my house, I will offer as a sacrifice. It could even be that what if a impure animal came out of my house? What, am I going to offer that to the Eibishter? Now in this case, Itaka did not work out. Nizdamna lobito, and it's his daughter came out of the house, and he ended up sacrificing his daughter, which on all accounts is not very good. V'hainu dika'amar lu Navi Yisrael, and this is what the Navi says to the Yidden: Hatzari ein begilad imrofe ein sham. Is there no balm in like Balm in Gilad? Is there no healer there? That basically Yiftach could have been like Matir as Neder or something like that. Apparently Pinchas was around during that time. He could have gone to Pinchas and annulled the vow, but he didn't for whatever reason. And anyways, he ended up sacrificing his daughter, which was not that isn't really a good thing. Uchsiv, and the pasuk says, "Asher l'tzivisi v'l'dibaiti v'l'alsa libi," that I did not command and I did not speak and it did not come upon my heart. Asher l'tzivisi, when it says that I did not command, Zeh beno shel Meisha melech Moab. This is the son of Meisha, king of Moab. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Vayikach es beno habechor Ashim loch tachto ve'aleu ola. That he took his son, his firstborn son, and he offered him as a sacrifice. Also, not a good thing. V'lo dibarti, when it says that I haven't spoken, said yiftach. That's a reference to yiftach that we just learned about. V'lo also libi, when it says it didn't come upon my heart, is Yitzchak ben Avram. That's a reference to Yitzchak ben Avram. That of course, when Avram Avinu went to sacrifice Yitzchak, so the Eibusha didn't want him to actually sacrifice his son Isaac. Amr Brechia says Brechia Af Knesses Yisrael Shala Shalo Kahogan. The Yidden Taka asked from the Eibishter not in the right way. V'Hakadosh Baruch Hu Eshiva Kahogan, and nonetheless the Eibishter replied and responded in a good way. Shneimar, as the Apostle says, V'Neida near the Faladas as Hashem will go and will chase to know God. Kashachar Nachon Motzo, like the morning. V'Yavo Kageshem Lanu, and it will be like rain. So they basically, ask that the Eibishter should be like rain for them. Now, Amr LaHakadosh Baruch Hu, so the Eibishter says to the Yidden, Biti, my daughter, you're asking for epis that sometimes it's taka good, sometimes it's not. In the winter, memele, rain is givaldik. So we can use a shtickle rain. I don't know, what's this, November already? We haven't really had any starker rains yet. But don't worry, it's going to get cold, it's going to get rainy, it'll get into your bones. That's the way it goes over here in Yerushalayim. Anyways, so in the winter it's taka the rainy season, but in the summer you don't want rain. So the Eibishter says, look, you're asking that I should be like rain, something that isn't always good. But I will be for you something that is always desirable. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Eya ketali Yisrael, I'll be like dew. The dew is it's always time for dew. It's always time for dew. Was that like the Mountain Dew? Was that their slogan? Mistama, right? It's always time for dew. Why not? If not, maybe it should be. Gemara and Taanis. Also, the Yidden asked for another thing not in the right way. Amr l'fan of Ribbono Shel Olam, they said before God, Master of the world, Simini kachosum alibecha, place me like a seal upon your heart, kachosum azorecha, like a seal. Excuse me. Oh wow. Sorry, I hope I didn't make anybody tired there. Simini kachosum alibecha, make me like a seal on your heart, kachosum azorecha, like a seal on your arm. Amr LaHakadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says to the Yidden, Biti, my daughter, you're asking for something that's sometimes visible, sometimes it's not. My heart. When you're going to see my heart, my arm, maybe if I'm wearing Lamaisa, I'm wearing a t-shirt. So I guess you could see my arm. What do you want me to tell you? But not always. If I was wearing a long sleeve shirt, you wouldn't be able to see it. Amr LaHakadosh Baruch Hu, Biti, you're asking for something that sometimes is visible, sometimes it isn't. Amr LaHakadosh Baruch Hu. No, I just read that. Avol ani esel chadav shenir leolam shnemer hein al kapayim chakosich. But I will make you into something that is always seen. As he says, that I will put you on my palms. My palms are generally always seen. Maybe in the winter you'll put on gloves or something, but the Maisa, your palms are generally available. Look, my palm, this is my left palm. My right palm is preoccupied. I'm holding a Gemara. Alright. So the Mishnah had said in Shu'alinas Agashavim Chulei that we only ask for rain next to the rainy season. Alright. So says the Gemara, so they're assuming, at least for now, that obviously we talked about already in the first Mishnah that there's a difference between mentioning rain and asking for rain. But says the Gemara that let's assume for a second that asking for rain is the same thing as mentioning the rain. So therefore, Mantana, Amar Ravi, Rabbi Yoshua. Well, if that's the assumption, if we're assuming that asking for rain is the same as mentioning rain, well then who's the one who says that we mention rain all the way at the end of Sukkot? That's Rabbi Yoshua. Who says sometime that you put down the lulav. Now, of course, Rashi says something extremely interesting. that he says, Mishas hanachoso, when's the time that you put down the lulav? So we were assuming up until now, and as Rashi himself said on Daf Beis and Beis, when do you put down your lulav? On the 7th day of Sukkot. That's the last day you're going to use the lulav and you put it down. Rashi over here says the 8th day of Sukkot. So it's a little bit confusing. What's the deal with Rabbi Yeshua's opinion? Is it day 7, day 8? Anyways. But says the Gemara, look, if we're saying that mentioning and asking are essentially the same thing, so then who's the one who says that you start mentioning rain all the way at the end of Sukkot? That's Rabbi Yeshua. Alright? Fine. Says Abai, you can even argue that Rabbi Eliezer is the one who says that you only start asking for rain close to the actual rainy season. Because asking for rain is different than mentioning rain. So even though Rabbi Eliezer says you mention the rain already from day 1 of Sukkot, but actually asking like Memele, we want rain, so then that is Samuch L'Gsham, that's a little bit later on, closer to the rainy season. To those who say Lema Rabbi Yoshui Davim B'Shas Hanachaso, to those who explain this differently, which is that, well, the Mishnah says that we only ask for rain close to the rainy season. So now the Gemara then wants to say, okay, that sounds like Rabbi Yoshua, who says you start mentioning rain right, at the end of Sukkot. And Amaravit, to which Rav says, Afilu Teim Rabbi Eliezer, you can even say that this is Rabbi Eliezer because Shei L'chud V'Azkar L'chud, because asking for rain and mentioning rain are two different things, and therefore, even though Rabbi Eliezer says that we mention rain from the first day of Sukkot, we only ask for rain Samuch L'Gishamim, close to the rainy season. So therefore, when the Mishnah says that we ask for rain close to the actual rainy season, that could even be Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, fine. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Uwa, says Rabbi Yehuda, over lifnei ateva v'chulei. Oh, so Rabbi Yehuda had said in the Mishnah that a fellow who's the shliach tzibur on Shmini Atzeres, so in Musaf he says the same. No, he says Mashavach Umatar Geshem. Okay. But friends, we have a question. Until when do we ask for rain? Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Sheyavar Pesach. Oh. So Rabbi Yehuda says that we ask for rain until Pesach is over. Rabbi Meir Omer Ad Sheyavar Nisan. Rabbi Meir says until Nisan is over. So we have a question, friends. We have a question. What's the question? The question is, well, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda said that the fellow who's the Shliach Tzibor for Musaf on Shmini Atzeres says Mashavach Umatar Geshem and continues to say so until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. Once you get to Musaf of the first day of Pesach, then you stop saying Mashavach Umatar Geshem. Now, that was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But what's Rabbi Yehuda saying over here? Ad Mosa Shoalin Sagasham, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Sheyavar Pesach. Rabbi Yehuda says that you're going to continue to ask for rain until after Pesach. So if you're continuing to ask for rain until after Pesach, so then how does that jive with Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, who says that on the first day of Pesach already you stop mentioning rain, and therefore we want to assume that Memele, if you're stopping to mention rain, you're not going to be asking for rain either. So Amar Rav Chizda, so Rav Chizda says Lo Kasha, it's no problem. Kan l'shol kan la'azkir. Oh, so Rav Chizda makes a distinction between asking and mentioning. Mishol shol v'ozu la'azkir b'yom tov rishon pasuk. That says Rav Chizda that while Rabbi Yehuda says that you continue to ask for rain until Pesach is over, however, you stop mentioning rain on the first day of Pesach. So during Chol HaMoed Pesach, you're going to still be saying V'sein Talamot Levracha, but you won't be saying Mashavach Umatar Geshem anymore. That's what Rav Chizda wants to say. Now, Omar Ula, friends, says Ula, Had Rav Chizda Kashuk Achometz L'Shinayim U'Cha'ashin Le'Einayim. Friends, you hear that? Says Ula that what Rav Chizda is asserting is so difficult. It's like vinegar to the teeth and like smoke to the eyes. Friends, that's not a very nice thing. Vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes. And that's what Ula is saying. Ula is saying that Rav Chizda did not say a very nice thing. Uma b'makom she'eno shoel mazkir. If on Shmini Atzeres, when you are not yet asking for rain, and yet you're already mentioning rain, sort of in anticipation of asking for rain, so then if Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you continue to ask for rain until after Pesach, well then then certainly you should be still at least mentioning rain, say Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem. If we start saying Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem even before we get up to the point where we're asking for rain, so Memele, as long as we're still asking for rain, you're still going to be saying Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem. And therefore, if Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you continue to ask for rain until after Pesach, so Memele, you also continue to say Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem until after Pesach. But how does that fit in with what he says in our Mishnah, that already on the first day of Pesach, you stop saying Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem? So Elo Amar Ula, so rather says Ula Trei Tanoia Libra Rabbi. So Ula says, look, what you have to say is that there's two different teachers of Braises quoting Rabbi Yehuda, and that they are different, right? That one teacher was quoting Rabbi Yehuda as saying that on the first day of Pesach, you already stop saying Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem at Musaf. Yet there's another teacher who's teaching that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that you continue to, you ask for rain throughout Pesach, and Memela also you'd be mentioning rain throughout Pesach as well. Alright, fine. Very good. Who can tell me where I am? Rav Yosef Amar. So it says Rav Yosef, My Achiyavar Pesach, Achiyavar Shliach Tzibur Rishon Ayored B'Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach. Friends, you hear what Rav Yosef is saying? Rav Yosef is trying to say that actually both opinions of Rabbi Yehuda are saying the same thing. That Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah says that you continue to say Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. And Rabbi Yehuda in the Brisa, who says that you continue to ask for rain until after Pesach. What does it mean until after Pesach? It means Achiyavar Pesach, Achiyavar Shliach Tzibur, until the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, Rishon, the Baal Shachar, Sayored B'Yom Tov Rishon Shal Pesach, who is going to pray on the first day of Pesach. Once you pass Shacharis of the first day of Pesach, so then already you're no longer going to say Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem, and that's what it means that Achiyavar Pesach, Achiyavar the first Shliach Tzibur, until after the first Shliach Tzibur of the first day of Pesach, who's davening Shacharis, already comes Musaf. You're not going to be saying V'sein Talamot Mashiv Baruch Me'ir Geshem anymore. Omle Abai. So now Abai says to Zebri of Yosef, Sheila B'Yom Tov Mi'ika. But how does this make any sense? Because after all, Rabbi Yehuda says that you ask for it. You say V'sein Talamot Levracha until after Pesach. And Rabbi Yosef wants to say that it means no, you continue to say V'sein Talamot Levracha until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. But says Abaye, on the first day of Pesach it's Yom Tov. You're not saying V'sein Talamot Levracha on the first day of Yom Tov. So it doesn't make sense to say that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you continue to say V'sein Talamot Levracha until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. You don't say V'sein Talamot Levracha Bichlal on the first day of Pesach. It's Yom Tov. So Omerle in Shalom Turgaman. So Rav Yosef says, the translator can. I.e., right, the way that they used to do it is that the teacher would kind of teach, and there would be a translator there who would then sort of say the teachings to all the people there. He was like the human microphone. So the translator there would just say the individual bracha of the V'sein Talamot Levracha. And that's what it means, and that would only be until Musaf of the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Of Pesach. Alright? But then the Gemara says, wait, what do you mean? But why would the translator be praying for rain if comes Pesach already? They don't need rain. So rather it makes sense like Ula to say that there's two different Rabbi Yehudas, two different teachers that are teaching the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. One of them is saying that Rabbi Yehuda says that you continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. The other one is saying that you continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem as well as V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha until after Pesach. Okay? Rabba Omar says Rabba, Mayat Shiabar Pesach. What does it mean until Pesach passes? At Shiabar Zman Shchitas HaPesach, until the time of the slaughtering of the Korban Pesach ends. That you continue to ask for rain until the afternoon of Erev Pesach. At that point, you no longer say V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha, but you will continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem until Musaf of the next day. Okay. And just like the way it starts, it also ends. Just like when you started saying Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem, you started saying it on the first day of on Shmini Atzeres, and yet you didn't yet start saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha. So also at the end, that you stop saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha already on Erev Pesach, yet you continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem until Musaf of the next day. Abaye says to Rabba, so it says Abaye, look, I understand why on Shmini Atzeres you would want to start mentioning rain already, even though you're not praying for rain yet, but I understand why before you start actually praying for rain, you'd want to mention the rain, because you want to start appeasing God for rain. But at the end, if we're saying that you stop saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha on Erev Pesach, well, that means that it's not relevant anymore. So if it's not relevant anymore, so then why would you keep on saying Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem? I understand it at the beginning. We want to already start mentioning it to sort of start getting it on God's radar, so to speak, to start appeasing God in advance. But once already we don't need rain anymore, so why are we continuing to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem? So the Machvartik to Ula, rather, it makes sense like Ula, once again, who says that it's two teachers teaching the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, one of which is one opinion that is quoting Rabbi Yehuda is that you continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem until Musaf of the first day of Pesach. The other opinion is that you continue saying, even asking for rain until after Pesach. Amr Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Asi, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, Gevaldik, that the halacha is take like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, fine. That you continue to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem until Musaf of the first day of Pesach, and that you start saying Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem on Shmini Atzeres, Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. Okay, fine. Amar Reb Zer to Reb Asi. Now says Reb Zer to Reb Asi, Amar Reb Yochanan Achi. Did Reb Yochanan really say this? V'atnan b'utakalun in the Mishnah b'shlosha b'marcheshvan shoalin esagisham. That on the third day of Marcheshvan, remember, Sukkot is over on the 21st day of Tishrei. Now we have a Mishnah that says b'shlosha b'marcheshvan shoalin esagisham, that we already start asking for rain on the third of Marcheshvan. Rabbi Gamliel Omer b'shivabo. Rabbi Gamliel says that you only start asking for rain on the 7th day of Marcheshvan, which I think that this is how we talk a paskin. And Rabbi Elazar says that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that we start saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha already from that we start saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha on the 7th day of Cheshvan. And the assumption for now is that when you start, we're assuming for now that when you start asking is also going to be when you start mentioning it. And therefore we're saying what? So we see in Machlokas that the Tanakama says that you start asking for rain on the 3rd of Marcheshvan. Rabbi Gamliel says you start asking for rain on the 7th of Marcheshvan. And the assumption for now is that when you ask, that's also when you're going to start saying Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem. Rabbi Elazar says that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, and if the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that we start saying V'sein Ta'al umatar Levracha on the 7th of Marcheshvan, so then Memela also we're going to say Mashiach Baruch Hu Geshem starting on the 7th of Marcheshvan. So how could Rabbi Yochanan be saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem on Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. If Rabbi Lazar says that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, and we're assuming that when you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha, that's also going to be when you're going to start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem. So Amarle, so Ravasi says Gavra Karamis. I don't understand. Enachinamis. So Rabbi Lazar says that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, but who says that Rabbi Yochanan agrees? Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda, that you start already saying Mashiach Moed Geshem from Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. Ibay Sema, if you want, I will say Lokasha, it's no problem. Kan Nishol, Kan Lahazkir. It depends if you're asking or if you're mentioning it. That all Rabbi Yehuda and what Rabbi Yochanan is paskening like is that you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem at Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's when you're going to start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha. V'sein Talamatu Levracha is going to be later. It's going to be, if we're going to say it, the halacha is like so we're going to start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha on the 7th day of Mar Cheshvan. But Mashiach Moed Geshem, we could already say from Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. But one second. But doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that when you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha, that's also when you're going to be saying Mashiach Moed Geshem? That is only at the end. That when it comes to Pesach, so when you stop saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha, that's also when you stop saying Mashiach Moed Geshem. So when you stop saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha, so that's when you stop saying Mashiach Moed Geshem. However, we could argue that when at the beginning you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem from Shmini Atzeres, but only V'sein Talamatu Levracha from the 7th of Mar Cheshvan. Ve'amar Rabbi Yochanan hischil lahazkir maschil lishol ha. But doesn't Rabbi Yochanan say that once you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem, that's also when you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha? Posak milishol posak milahazkir. And when you stop asking for rain, when you stop saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha, that's also when you stop saying Mashiach Moed Geshem. And yet, if we say that Rabbi Yochanan is holding like Rabbi Yehuda says that you continue to say Mashiach Moed Geshem until Musaf of the first day of Pesach, even though you're not saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha anymore, since you're not going to be saying that at Shacharis of Pesach either, because it's Yom Tov. Ela lokasha halon v'ha lehu. So it says the Gemara, alright, it's no problem. It depends on the Ma'aser. It depends if you're in Eretz Yisrael or if you are in Chutz La'aretz. That in Eretz Yisrael, so let's see, so let's go back to a second. So Mashna Ladidon the Islan Per Bedavra, the Didunami Islu Ole Regolim. But one second. So we want to say, okay, so it depends. So when Rabbi Yochanan says that when you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem, right? So Rabbi Yochanan is saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem already from Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. Now, when Rabbi Yochanan says, and when you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem, that's also when you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha. So then, that's in Eretz Yisrael. And when we say that, we wait until the 7th of Mar Cheshvan in order to start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha. So that's in Bavel. So now, for the Gemara, what's the difference? What's the difference? Ma'ashna L'didan, what's the reason why in Bavel they start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, the Islam Per B'davra? Well, okay, so in Bavel they still have their fruit out in the fields until the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, so they wait to pray for rain until then. But the Didunami Islu Ole Regalim. But in Eretz Yisrael also, there are the people who went to be Ole Regel, that need to have enough time to get home. And therefore you don't want to start davening for rain immediately at the end of Shmini Atzeres, because how are the people going to get home? So why would you start saying V'sein Talamatu Levracha already then? So answer the Gemara, Kikam Rabbi Yochanan Bizman She'ein Beis HaMikdash Kaim. Well, when Rabbi Yochanan says that when you start saying Mashiach Moed Geshem On Shmini Atzeres, that's also when you start saying V'sein Tal Umatar Levracha. So that is when there's no Beis HaMikdash. And when there's no Beis HaMikdash, so then you don't have Oli Regalim, and therefore they could start saying V'sein Tal Umatar Levracha immediately. But Hashta the Asas Lachi, so once already we're talking about whether there's a Beis HaMikdash or not, so you could say that both opinions of Rabbi Yochanan were in Eretz Yisrael, where he lived. And it just depends that when Rabbi Yochanan says that you start saying V'sein Tal Umatar Levracha immediately, so that is when there is no Beis HaMikdash. And when Rabbi Yochanan says that you start saying V'sein Tal Umatar Levracha on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan, so that is when there is a Beis HaMikdash, and you want to give time for the people who came to Yerushalayim to be able to travel back to where they are. So we, who have 2 days, right, like in Chutz La'aretz, where there's Shmini Atzeres and then Simchas Torah, so what do they do vis-a-vis Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, right? Because if it's a Sveka Diyoma, so we want to make sure that you're specifically starting to say V'sein Tal Umatar Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem on the proper day. So Amar Rav Maschil b'Musafin. So Rav says, well, on Musaf of Shmini Atzeres of the first day, so you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem Ufosik b'Mincha Arvis v'Shachris, and then at Mincha and at the following Marv and the following Shachris, you do not say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, just in case it's day 7 of Sukkot. So therefore, at Musaf you say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, but then out of concern that maybe Shmini Atzeres is really just Hoshana Rabbah, is really the day before, it's day 7. So then at Mincha, at Ma'ariv, at Shachris the next day, you do not say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem. V'chozer b'Musafin, and then at Musaf of Simchas Torah, you then continue to say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem. Amlu Shmuel. Shmuel said to the students, Poku ve'amru le'Abba, go and tell Rav, Achash Asiso Kodesh Tasei Uchol. Says Shmuel, I don't understand. After you've already said that this day is Memele Shmini Atzeres, because you're saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem at Musaf, and Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem is only by Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. So Memele, from the fact that you're saying that Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem at Musaf, so you're saying that today is Shmini Atzeres. That's why you say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem. So after you've already declared today is Shmini Atzeres, you're then at Mincha, and you're not gonna say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem. You're gonna say, well, maybe it's Taka not Shmini Atzeres. You already said it is Shmini Atzeres by saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem. So how are you gonna now make it not Shmini Atzeres and not say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem? Ela Amar Shmuel, rather says Shmuel, Maschil b'Musafin u'v'mincha. So rather says Shmuel, no. You start on Shmini Atzeres, you say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem at Musaf and also at Mincha, and then Ufosek Arvis v'Shachris, and then at Mariv and Shachris to the next day, you don't say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, because now it's already a new day, and therefore we're going to wait until Musaf of that new day. V'chozer u'maschil b'Musafin, and then at Musaf of the second day of Simchas Torah, you then say Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem again, and then you don't stop until Pesach. Rav Omar says, Rav came Shishchel Shuvenu Posek. Says Rav, no. Once you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem on Shmini Atzeres, Kilu, on the first of the 2 last days of Sukkot, so then once you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, you don't stop. V'chein Omer Rav Sheshes, and similarly says Rav Sheshes, came Shishchel Shuvenu Posek. Once he starts saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, he doesn't stop. Rav Hodar Bey, and even Rav retracted Amar Rav Chananel Marab. Says of Chananel, the name of Rab, Mona Esim ve'echad yom, Yitaka count 21 days from Rosh Hashanah, Kederch Shemone, Asar Yom Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. Just like you count 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, you also count 21 days, Umaschil, and then you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, V'chevin Shishchil, Shuvenu Posek, and once you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, you don't stop, V'chevin Shishchil, Shuvenu Posek, and the halacha taka is that yes, once you start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, you do not stop, and the Maisa, that's what we do. Even in Chutz La'aretz, on the 8th day of Sukkot, they start saying Mashav Baruch Moed HaGeshem, and then they do not stop, even on Simchas Torah. Friends, that was the Avdalad of Masechta Taanis. What did you guys think? So there was some interesting agaritas at the beginning, some interesting assertions about young whippersnapper Talmidei Chachamim who, if they get upset, it's not them getting upset, it's the Torah getting upset. And then we mentioned different people who asked for things not quite specifically enough, but in two cases the Eibishter helped out, in one case not, by Eliezer, Eved Avram, as well as by Shaul. They didn't exactly ask for things specifically enough, but the Eibishter kind of helped out anyways. But by Yiftach, he ended up sacrificing his daughter, which was not exactly a very good thing. And then we got to the interesting question of when exactly do you start saying V'sein tal umatar levracha? So we saw a machlokas between Tanakama and Rabbi Gamliel. Tanakama says that you start saying V'sein tal umatar levracha from the 3rd of Cheshvan, and Rabbi Gamliel says you start saying it from the 7th of Cheshvan. And then we saw that Rabbi Yochanan says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that in terms of Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem, you start saying it already from Shmini Atzeres. And we wanted to assume at the beginning that, well, when you start saying Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem, that's also when you're going to start saying V'sein tal umatar levracha. So we gave a few different answers. The first route they wanted to take was, well, it depends if you're in Bavel or if you're in Eretz Yisrael. In Bavel, so then you would start saying V'sein tal umatar levracha and davening for rain from the 7th of Mar Cheshvan or the 3rd, depending on the machlokas. But in Eretz Yisrael, you would already start saying V'sein tal umatar levracha when you start saying Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at the end of Sukkot. And the reason being that in Bavel, it would take longer for they would leave out their stuff in their fields a little bit longer, so they would wait off for davening for rain. Whereas in Eretz Yisrael, they would have already harvested everything gathered everything from before Sukkot, so you could start davening for rain immediately. And then we said, yeah, but what about the Olei Regalim, the people who came to Eretz Yisrael for the festivals? We said, well, it's after the Beis HaMikdash. There's no longer a Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, we said, well, if already we're talking about that there's no Beis HaMikdash, or a distinction whether there was a Beis HaMikdash or not, so we could say, actually, forget about Bavel, they're both talking about in Eretz Yisrael. When there's a Beis HaMikdash and there are people visiting, being Olei Regal and have to get back home, so then we only start praying for rain on the 7th of Mar Cheshvan. Whereas when there's no Beis HaMikdash, and there's no Olei Regalim, so then, or Olei Regel, then already you could start davening for rain after Shmini Atzeres. Now, regarding Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem, so we saw 3 different opinions about, in Chutz La'aretz, where there's a Sveika Diyoma, so there's Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, so how does that pan out in terms of Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem? So Rav said what you do is you start saying Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at Musaf on Shmini Atzeres, and then you stop. Not at Mincha, not at the following Mariv or the following Shacharis, and you only pick it up again on the next day at Musaf. Shmuel doesn't like that because he says, look, by saying Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem on Shmini Atzeres, you're saying that today's Taka Shmini Atzeres. So how then at Mincha can you leave out Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem, saying that, wait, maybe it's Taka a weekday, maybe it's Hoshana Rabbah. So rather says Shmuel, no, what you do is, you say Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at Musaf and Shmini Atzeres and at Mincha, and then already when it comes to Mariv of Simchas Torah, then it's a new day and it's like, okay, let's start over. And then you don't say Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at Mariv or at Shacharis and you pick it up again from Musaf. Rava says that no, once you start saying Mashav Ruach Moed HaGeshem at Musaf of Shmini Atzeres, you don't stop. Rav Sheshis agrees, and even Rav ended up saying that way as well. Friends, that was the Avdalad of Masechta Taanis. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.